and happy Monday. Welcome to the Wellness Movement. I am your host, Julie. You are watching Spanglish World and Third Networks on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Remember to download the Zingo TV app on your app store. It's free, and leave a comment. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks on all smart TVs from 2016 forward. I have to say, for the first time, I've been doing this show since, what, March? I finally printed my intro. Okay, so I have a very special guest today. Baron, this beautiful gentleman here, is an experiential learning supportive arts and personal development coach. With over a decade of creative and transformational work experience, Baron uses innovative and art-inspired techniques to achieve breakthrough results with his clients. Throughout his career, Baron has supported CEOs, nonprofit organizations, small business owners, recording artists, celebrities, social justice advocates, and stay-at-home moms. Baron founded BaronArts to create a welcoming space for people of all walks of life to feel seen, live in their possibility, and inspires others to do the same. His programs bring together people to heal, celebrate their story, access joy and abundance, and share their unique gifts with the world. Baron knows what it is like to be on the margins of society as a gay youth growing up in Newark, New Jersey. With all signs pointing to a way out, Baron chose one way in: the arts. Either on a stage, behind a microphone, or in front of the camera, Baron's mission was to inspire and share with others and to see and be seen. It's here where the seeds were planted for the vision behind BaronArts. Baron is also an award-winning, multi-disciplined artist and motivational speaker. As a consulting facilitator for Momentum Education and the Medici Group, he's delivered top-tier results-driven and team performance programs to participants across the U.S. Baron has also led transformative and creative workshops abroad in Thailand, Iceland, and Tanzania. So welcome to the Wellness Movement, Baron. And when we spoke, I think it would have been back in March.
Yes, it was back in March. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me be here.
Well, I mean, it's kind of lucky for me because it's Pride Month.
Correct. All right.
I read your bio and I was like, oh goodness, I didn't drop the ball. I didn't just completely ignore Pride Month. So it's great that we're having this conversation because I think there's so many layers that we can unravel here with your story and how you grew up. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So, Newark, New Jersey.
Yes, born and raised.
Born and raised back in the day. And so what was that like? Because I mean, from the cultural background that I'm from, homosexuality is definitely frowned upon. And so, and also like, if I think back to like the 90s and stuff, it wasn't like when I was growing up, it wasn't as accepted as it is now. And I mean, obviously there's also work still to be done. Always work to be done. But what was your experience like?
So yeah, growing up in the 90s in Newark, New Jersey, which is like an urban city, and back then was a tough city. It has gone through many changes. It was like a really tough city to live in. And for me, coming out, I think I came out when I was 15. And for me, it was still home, but it was very tough. Luckily, I had a family that loved me regardless. And I think that's where the basis of all my experiences came from, is having a loving family. And then in New York City was like just a hop, jump, and skip away. So having New York City be so close gave me a way to sort of escape New York, escape my home, or escape the homophobia, just to escape the environment itself. And so I found that being a way, especially New York City, being a way for me to become more expressive of myself and develop myself.
Yeah.
But growing up it was tough, to like being bullied and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like New York, Toronto, San Francisco have very thriving gay communities.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so like what was that like, those communities in the 90s?
They part shady, okay, part shady, and then there was a welcoming sort of experience there, because you, for the first time in my life, I was around a group of people who had ideas and thoughts and feelings like I did.
Mhm.
Um, stuff that I rarely found in Newark or New Jersey, and so and also um, there was a group of like young teens, even though their story may not have been as great, because a lot of them were thrown out, right?
Mm.
And the streets were, or how they lived was like pretty much on the streets. But there was like a community of people who sort of supported each other because the rest of the world didn't see them as relevant.
Right.
And I liked being able to have conversations with people I just couldn't have at home.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's also interesting because like we live in such a socially connected world right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you are a trans or a gay teenager, pretty much anywhere on the planet, you can find a community of people online, even if you're in a part of the world where this lifestyle is not accepted. But back in the 90s, there was no internet. Well,
No,
always
it was dial up.
there was dial up. There was no Facebook, no Instagram, no YouTube. There was like no way to connect with people who were like minded. And
Mm-hmm.
so you just imagine being in a small town and feel like knowing in your heart of hearts that you're not straight and you're not going to do what, because there's expectations, like the societal expectations even today to live your life by a certain formula is huge, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But the difference is now we can go online and we can find our people.
Right. And so so how I use that time, I became creative, right? So the arts is where you do find it. I found a different community around being an artist, around music, around performing, around modeling. So and in those specific like art based cultures, you can find like people. So I turned to that community as a way in which to find some semblance of someone who understands me.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also like, I would say growing up in the 90s, I remember, I guess Madonna was a little Madonna, you got Prince, you know.
Yes.
But there wasn't, I mean, I guess today's version would be Lady Gaga.
Yes, yes. And there were, yes, so there were those, and then there were people who were always like there are people that are super known, but there are people who weren't as known as much, who were always on the fringe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I gravitated to any artist who was on the fringe just because I felt like they represented who I was at that time on the fringe. So it was a really I think about the 90s was very explorative for me growing up, finding myself and understanding that family is something that you have and then also something that you can create.
Right. Yes, for sure.
I think that was sort of me growing up in the 90s around also creating family and understanding what that meant.
So at what age did you start going into New York City and kind of see, because like I love New York. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And like you can connect with so many different kinds of people. So like how old were you when you started taking the train in?
I can share now because I'm grown. But I started going there in like 2000, when I was 15. I would take me and my best friend at the time would sneak over sometime, or sometimes I would go by myself.
Mhm.
Because I just, and then my first time being there, I knew that one day I would live there. Like it
Yeah.
became like, I'm going to live here in New York City. I
Mhm.
eventually did, but like at 15, I was like, okay, let me just figure out how to get here and get back home in time enough so I won't get in trouble. But yeah, I couldn't, I felt like where I was living wasn't representative of who I was. And every
Mhm.
time I stepped on New York City soil, I breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I do want to back up a little bit because, like, you mentioned that you were bullied in school, and because you actually came out. It's funny because, like, when I went to school, there were people that were gay, but they chose not to come out, and it was funny because, like, I really, and I hadn't even like
Hmm.
fully read your bio, but then I started thinking about this person that I know. Last night, I started thinking about this person that I know who I grew up with, and he pretty much stayed in the closet until, like, got married, had kids, the whole 9 yards,
Mm.
deep in the closet until I want to say 4 years ago.
Mm.
And so, what was that about, like making that choice to come out? Because so many people in that era didn't necessarily do that because they knew that the social implications were so huge.
Hmm. So for me, when I came out, the person who I cared the most about knowing was my grandmother who raised me.
Mm.
Um, and at 15, it was a was a really interesting coming out story. But at 15, I was like, I have to be honest with her. And once it happened, and I got her sort of like, I love you anyway. I didn't care about anybody else. Right? It wasn't. I think I may have came out 2 more times. I said I'm not doing this anymore because it's just too much emotional strain on me. So
Mhm.
you're gonna meet me who I am. But it was my grandmother specifically who I wanted to make sure that, um, and I had no doubt that she was going to love me anyway. But it's just one of those things you sort of scared to do, but it helped me accept me. I had already had ideas. I already had like it helped me accept me for who I was. And then once she was like, "Well, I love you anyway," I didn't care about anyone else.
Right.
And yeah, and so that's how I sort of moved through life after she was like, "Okay, I love you anyway, and I just want you to be careful and be safe." I said,
Yeah,
"Okay."
that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. And so, I mean, in terms of bullying, what happened with school?
School, well, I went to a gifted and talented school, so it was a bit I went to a school full of smart people, and but the bullying, I wasn't bullied. Well, maybe I'm trying to revisionist history. 'Cause maybe I just took it on the chin as this is part of the 90s.
Yeah,
This is part of growing. This is part of. I lived in a rough town. I lived in a rough city, so it was part of like this is part of what the city is. But it did happen. Happened a few times, and I don't know. I can say looking back on it that. Uh, I think it does affect you as you grow older. It
yeah.
does affect. It also affects you in those particular situations because your guard is up, and then your guard sort of remains up,
Right,
and you're always looking. You're always not feeling 100% safe.
right.
And I think so that's sort of like the bullying that happened at that time. Still, like leaves. Uh, it leaves you with stuff. It leaves you holding on to things,
Mhm.
questioning yourself,
Yeah.
questioning your livelihood. And I think what's been the work that I've done for like self work that I've done, it's like really being very clear about the gift that I am. counteracting anything that I may have thought prior that didn't fit that description.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just really, really interesting because like so much of what we experience in childhood and as teenagers, it
Mm-hmm.
can be such an imprint, and that if you're not very consciously removing those sort of old stories and blocks and wounds, it can literally keep you stuck in a certain pattern for your entire life,
Your
right?
entire life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say, think of yourself as a question,
Mm-hmm.
because then you will not factualize who you are. Well, I'm this, I'm that. Continue to grow, continue to think yourself as a question, someone who can constantly evolve and expand. And then you won't be able, and so those old conversations that no longer work, you can get rid of them a lot quicker because you realize it's not who I am today. It may or may not have been who I was before, or
Right.
who I thought of who I was before.
Yeah, and also like it might be a story that we take on because it is so human nature to want to fit in. We want to be accepted. Like our back in the olden days, pre-electricity, back when we lived in like hunter-gatherer tribes, like our entire survival depended on being accepted by others around us. And so that
Mm-hmm.
that thing is still alive
Still
within
alive.
all of us, right?
Mm-hmm. Very much alive. And so I'll always say, what do you want? Right? It's always like, not what I can do, because sometimes we take on things because we want to be accepted, like more like, what do you want? Which is for many is a difficult question to answer. And so I was like, what do you want? What do you want? Just so that you're maintaining your uniqueness, as we're all designed to be different, maintaining your uniqueness in the life that you design for yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's okay to want to be part of like a community, because we are community oriented beings, but then it's also like, who are you individually, and what do you want to leave, or what do you want to express while you're here?
Right. So in terms of, for you, finding this artistic expression, excuse me, what was your sort of discipline that you gravitated towards?
I think I did everything, but the first thing I experimented with was photography. I really love taking pictures of people. I'm really into like looking at people, how people move, how people talk, how people just different in the difference that we are. So photography was my first love. I also have done performance poetry, where I do spoken word. I've then transfer that into music and DJing and like graphic design. So I love arts. So you'll find me interested in whatever. The only thing I haven't done is like sculpture or painting. I may have done it before, but I'm not really I haven't done it in depth. But performance art, music. I have 2 albums.
Wow. That's cool, because one album alone is a lot of work, but 2?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Did you put some spoken word on that?
Okay, then there's 3. There's a spoken word album, and then there's 2 other albums. So there's 3 altogether.
Wow.
Let me update. There's 3.
So did you ever do like dance or theater?
I've done theater. I haven't done dance. I like to dance, but I've not. I thought I thought dance would be too much school. It'd be too much training. And I was like, I just enjoy doing it on my own. But no, I have not done dance.
It's so funny because when I think of the arts, I did think of dance.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I'm not sure why that like kind of came to me, but that's okay. That could just be my thing because I love dancing, not that I'm any good at it.
No, no, I love dancing, and everything, but I didn't. Yeah, I thought it was like it'd just be too much training to
Mhm.
sort of. And I'm maybe there's still time.
There is still time. I also would say the same thing about the painting and the sculpture. You just never know. You never know what might speak to you and when you might get the pull, the call, right?
Hmm. Right.
So then how did you like transform all of this? Because you're a speaker, you're obviously an artist, and you bring all
Mhm.
of these. This is the cool thing about, I think for some people, I used to get super freaked out because I couldn't pick one thing.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my God, I can't pick the one thing. And I have
Mhm.
like a background
Definitely.
as an actor, as a writer, as a filmmaker, as a speaker, and I do all of these different things. And it used to really, really freak me out. And then, of course, obviously, my background with health, because I did yoga for a long time or taught yoga for a long time. And now I'm doing nutrition and coaching and all this stuff. And I thought, oh my God, like, am I just a little schizophrenic here?
Like I'm talking to a twin. Been, been there, and I sort of reconciled with myself. Is that I'm my interest is in exploring new things
Mhm.
and or exploring things, and so because that's my interest, I can be interested in many things.
Right.
And you asked me what brought me to like coaching or training. I sort of fell into I sort of fell into it. There was a company called Momentum Education, which it's a really great company. It's like a personal development. And I went through the program in 2006 and started like coming back and supporting and staffing. And then in 2000, I think 10 or something, the director and I had a conversation around would I be interested in training up to be one of their trainers for their leadership course. And I was like, me? You started talking to me? And me, I went home, thought about it, and said, I love the work. I love the work. And started training and becoming a trainer, which is encompassing. It's a very intense sort of workshop. And
Mhm.
and I did my first training. What I loved about it was I'm always been like I love to inspire people. So what I wanted was inspiring people to like live their goals, live their lives,
Mhm.
and seeing the results that they create for themselves and for other people. And I've not left that field ever since because I enjoy being like I say a bit like a small step in like a big journey for
Right.
people, and any way I can support or guide, uh, and you discovering what's next for you, it's like it's gold.
Yeah. I mean, so then I think like 3 or 4 years ago, I heard a phrase for it, our little sort of schizo habit. Um,
Hmm.
it was called it. The phrase that I heard is multi-passionate entrepreneur,
Oh, I love it.
and I was like,
Now.
that is exactly what I am. Now that said, there are times when I'm more focused on one thing than other
Yep.
things. You know, when something requires more of my attention, and I recognize that, and I work on that. And
Hmm.
I also know, like, okay, I know I'm going to go back to this other thing. And so I've kind of made my peace with it because no matter what, there's certain things that I probably will never say no to, right?
Hmm.
But it's good to have that flexibility. And I mean, I even have, because I played music, I played multiple different musical instruments.
Okay, awesome.
So I even have this fantasy in my head where eventually, when I get to a certain point, I'm going to go back to playing certain musical instruments.
Hmm.
I mean, I won awards. Like I wasn't like just you know like you know playing musical instruments and someone's got to plug their ears as they walk by. Like I straight up won awards. I was very, very serious about it for a long time. And then I had to let it go because I left home when I was really, really young. And
Hmm.
I ended up having to go and get a part time job outside of school. And so I just had to let that part go because there were more important things that I had to address. But that doesn't mean that I've left that part of me forever. So would you say that there are things that you've tried on the artistic side that that eventually you're going to go deeper into that exploration, or you want to revisit?
So I hope so, right? There's always an album inside of me. There's always a new album inside of me that I'm always working at. There's and to speak to like being a multi-passionate entrepreneur, it all supports the next step. I don't know how to explain it to someone who doesn't have it, but somehow the first thing you did does support in all the last thing you've done. Something you learn, some technique, some experience you had does always inform the next the step you take. So for me, I love music. I DJ sometimes, so music is within me. So I always say, okay, I got one more album. I can do one more album. So that's like the only thing I'm thinking that would be the thing I would go back to and really, really create.
Well, there's always time.
There's always time. There's always time. Yep.
There's always time. So you've like gone and led workshops internationally, and how was that experience? Because I mean, especially these days, we don't get to travel much anymore.
I know.
But it's always interesting going to like a whole other part of the world, and the culture is different, the language is different, the customs are different. And so what is that like? Do you find people are more receptive to these concepts and ideas, or is it about the same?
I think I would say there are different nuances given where you are in the world. But I will also say that people are always looking for answers to the same question, right? In some form, what's next for me is a big one around the world. What's next for me? Right now, I'm in this particular position. What's next for me? And I think, and also another question people are asked, it's like, could we do this? Is how do I create space for myself? Because we're giving people, we're always giving out, and then in that process, we sort of lose time to create space for what we want. And so because those questions are usually universal, the trainings are universal in that way.
Yeah, no, that's really great. So how long ago were you in Thailand, and what part?
I was in 2019 is when I went to Thailand, and we went to it was like part of an excursion. So I also curate excursions to other parts. So one was Thailand, and the other one I did was in Iceland. But in Thailand, we went to Phuket was part. We also stayed in like a fishing village for a night, which was awesome. And then took a plane to have a different experience in Bangkok.
Wow. And then how was Tanzania?
The way I describe it is that I've never been in a place where everyone had my same skin color. And it was jarring because there was a familiarity, also very much knowing that I was something different. Right. I'm an American, so I had my Americanness in this country where people who look like me but are very much different from me. And it was an eye-opening experience. I loved it though. I loved Tanzania. The food was amazing. People were amazing. Yeah.
How long did you get to be there?
It was like more or less a week.
Yeah.
More or less a week.
I would say, like, I mean, I was born and raised, I am born and raised in Canada, in Winnipeg, but my parents are of South Asian descent. And the last, was it? I think it was, sorry, don't mind the whining in the background. That's my dog. Stop it. The joy of working from home.
The joy of working from home.
One of the trainings I did, yoga teacher trainings I did, was in 2008 in India. And I hadn't been to India as an adult. I remember going as a kid, but when you're a kid, you don't have the same memory. And so I don't speak the language. I don't know anything about the cultural customs. I'm very Canadian, which for some people is very jarring because they expect certain things of me that I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? So I went to India and I thought, okay, like, because I did grow up speaking the language, but when I left home so young, I stopped speaking it. I only spoke English and maybe some broken French. And so I went there and I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm in the land of my people and I'll unlock that spot in my brain that will completely unleash Hindi, Punjabi that I know is somewhere in there. And I'll be amongst my people. Well, I was a foreigner through and through. I mean, it didn't matter how I dressed. I could dress in traditional outfits, but they could spot me a mile away.
Yes, which is so interesting.
Right?
It's so interesting. Because it's not just how you look, it's like the way you walk, your mannerism, like it's a whole different feel. Like I guess I could understand you feel like you're a part, which you are, but then you also can say, I feel so not a part.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting because I mean, that's the thing of like being non-white is like, even in Canada, like I'm the other, right? So there's like this longing to be somewhere where you're universally accepted. And yet, because you're raised in an entirely different culture and place, it's like that doesn't exist. And I think this is the story for anybody who's like ethnic and first generation, like if you're not white.
Hello.
Yeah, exactly. You're not white, you're probably always going to have that little bit, that experience, right?
Yeah, of where do I belong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do I belong? And I think like this is the tricky thing because Canadians love to be very self-congratulatory and be like, oh yeah, we don't have the racial problems of the US. We do, we're just a little bit more polite.
Got it.
Which makes it worse because then nobody talks about it, right? It changed a little bit last year with Black Lives Matter. I went to a march. To get emotional. I went to a march after George Floyd's murder, and I was very, very touched. Like we were in lockdown. Toronto's been more or less in lockdown for 14 months or a year and a half now. And so I really debated going to that gathering because I was like, wait a minute, like we're in lockdown, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm going. Like, there's no way I'm not going. And it was really, really touching to see because Toronto, like New York, is very multicultural.
Yep.
And it was great to see like basically Toronto come out in all the colors to represent and to walk together. So I'm not sure what that time was like in New York City. I have friends in New York City, some who are photographers who share their pictures on social media of like different things that are going on in New York in terms of like the marches, whether it's like, you know, what's been going on with Black Lives Matter or with some of the other marches that have been going on. So how has it been there in New York?
Well, I'm I wish I was in New York. I'm in Philadelphia, but I was raised, but I was in New York for a very long time and prior to, but how can I say this? The experience in is inspiring in one way because there was a sort of an eye-opening experience of what people of color have been saying
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning of time, since the beginning of it, and so there was a public and very public outrage around it, and it was inspiring to see people of young people, older people, people different ethnic backgrounds sort of come and rally around this particular murder, and in one way I find it great. I find it like inspiring, and then also understanding the US has a problem. And so the US, and then in the aftermath, the US is looking to, like I said, is looking to sort of reverberate, like it's shrink itself after such an expansive moment.
Mm-hmm.
So like there has been advances, yes, there has been advances, but the way it feels today as if we're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Um, and my hope is that what we all experienced through the marches, through the protesting, really forward us to the right side of history,
Mm-hmm.
rather than looking to go backwards,
Right.
which in some parts of the U.S. looks very familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I mean, very much I kind of feel where you're coming from because we're going through a similar thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there have been some like pretty crazy things that have come to the surface in the last couple of weeks. One is with the residential school system, which because I grew up in Winnipeg, I always knew of this system because I grew up around a lot of Aboriginal folks. And
Mm-hmm.
knew that there was this history that was never spoken about in the classes that we were taught on Canadian history. It was a very whitewashed Canadian history. And so I only knew of it like word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But now what's coming to the surface is these residential schools and how there were all these bodies that are buried. And I mean, I think there hasn't really been a true reconciliation or attempt at reconciliation with the Aboriginal peoples of this country. And I would say similarly, there hasn't been a proper reconciliation with African Americans in the US. And that, I think, reconciliation has is a big step forward. But there's the powers that be in the respective countries seem to have such a resistance to it. Like I actually ended up doing a Facebook Live because then last week, I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday, but some crazy white man plowed into a Muslim family and killed, I think, 4 people. And so it was interesting because like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, there was a school bus crash of a bunch of young men who were all hockey players. And it's tragedy. It's all tragedy. Like there's no like hierarchy of one thing is more tragic than the other. It's just tragedy, right?
Yes.
And there was this outpouring of grief and sadness and acknowledgement. And I didn't see that the last couple of weeks. And so I went on a Facebook Live and I said, why is that? Like, why is that in this country we cannot have these conversations amongst ourselves and then apply some pressure where it needs to be applied? And I think that's what we're talking about. There's been these marches and this recognition, and yet we have to look at like the power structures.
Yeah.
What's actually changing?
Exactly. And I think that's the fight we're on currently. It's really about one's reconciliation, like really like acknowledge the damage, and then what do we do to have it not be this case moving forward?
Right.
What policies do we put in together? And we have to actively do stuff, because if we rest, the U.S. will rest on its history
Yeah.
rather than the possibility of its future. And so it's like, what actively can we all do, or what actively are we all willing to do to further the country?
Well, I mean, I would have to say that this is more on the side of the oppressors than the oppressed, right?
Yes, yes, and hear me, and I hope I'm saying in the space that in space of I'm giving in the space of love. If we all rest,
Mhm.
then we'll rest on history.
Mhm.
I think we all have to play a part in being very active about moving ourselves forward. So yes, it's the oppressed and the oppressors and the oppressed both have to be very active in moving the conversation and the society forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, what you have worked with social justice advocates, and
Yes.
what has that work looked like?
With social justice, so some it's one-on-one. So I work with people on a one-on-one basis, and that's more like um, forwarding them so they can create space to work, because it's grueling work.
It is.
It's to wake up every day knowing there's a no and hoping there's a yes. Can be some grueling work. And then it's also working with organizations. And I know I work with this organization that does travel, or work within travel, and it's really supporting them and designing their founding guidelines. What does it mean for them for sustainable travel? What does regenerative travel mean? Like it's working with them and setting goals and achieving goals around their vision for their company and the vision for the world they want to impact.
I think it's really powerful what you said, like in terms of like we are all in this conversation, because traditionally there were conversations and policies and things that were happening that were affecting others, but we weren't necessarily a part of that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually really, really interesting, because I like read a book a couple weeks ago. What's it called? We Should All Be Millionaires.
Hmm.
And this woman is a badass, like
That
bad.
sounds good title.
Yeah, we should all be millionaires. But I loved what she said. I wish I could remember her name. Rachel, can't remember her last name. But really, really powerful, powerful woman. And I can't remember what city she's in. I want to say she's somewhere in North Carolina. But it was really about like not only coming to the table with conversation, but also for all of us that are not considered like a majority, even though technically I think we're a majority
Technically,
of
yes.
the population. Technically, we're a majority, but for us to really have these conversations, but also to start creating our own wealth and
Mm-hmm.
and and use that to funnel into the things that we believe in and the causes that we support, because it's lit the saying used to always be like, it's about getting a seat at the table. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you actually want to build a whole new freaking table.
True. And the thing is, we have to acknowledge that there have been times, because sometimes as we advance, we sort of forget about the past, right? And so there have been times throughout history where we've looked to, so we people of color, and have looked to create our tables.
Mm-hmm.
And because and when we do a really great job at it, the forces knocks us down. So like recently we just celebrated the 100 year of the Tulsa Massacre, right? Where these a group of white people demolished a affluential Black neighborhood 100 years ago. And so there are pockets of history where if you give us a chance to do our stuff, we can actually contribute. But because of the conversation of America, you won't allow it. So I think I also think where we're at now is a conversation of, okay, we've won the 2020 election, but we can't allow this to happen in 2024. So we're going to do all of these things to block that access because we can't reconcile with everyone having access. So millionaires could have already been made, but because of the systems that we live in and the systems that are created haven't allowed it.
Yeah. It's so funny because, well, it's not funny, it's tragic because like I think I only found out about the Tulsa Massacre, I want to say last year. Yeah. Because there's so little of this history that's shared. And I'm discovering things. I'm like, how did I not know that?
You have to search it. There's a ton of stuff out there. You have to actually search it out. And so I always praise documentarians, people who write about it, because it's there, but because it will decenter the conversation America wants to have for itself. Yeah. You have to search for it. And I believe that, look, the slave story is a great American story to see what they went through to where we are today. You want to, I mean, less is a dark history. Yes, it's dark. There's nothing great about slavery. Right. The story of what the people did throughout the generations is a great American story.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's maybe hard. Embrace it. Right. And share it, and then don't do it again. Not to go back to it.
Right. Yeah. These are tough conversations, right? They're uncomfortable conversations. They're emotional conversations. But the only way there was this wonderful woman that I used to take her yoga classes back when I lived in Vancouver. And she used to always say, the only way out is through.
True.
Yeah.
Very much so.
But for all of us to get through this, we have to really focus on getting through it together. And also like getting out of this mindset, like it is a lack mentality, I think personally. That stipulates that there's only so much to go around.
Yes.
But if you step into an abundance mentality,
yes,
then there's enough for everybody, and it's a lot easier to work in community because like there's enough to go around.
Which why I praise them. My rare occasion, which is why I praise the millennials for giving. I praise them. I joke about it all the time. About thank you for Airbnb, thank you for Uber. Like ways in which they're bringing in the idea of a shared sort of system. That it's not about who you are. It's about you're part of our community. Or what's called work? What's called WeWork? Yeah. Like let's build community, rather than let's create this division. So I praise them rarely, but this is one thing I praise them for is introducing what it is to share and how that looks and how that can look and actually be sustainable. And I think that because I used to do Airbnb when I lived in New York City for a number of years. And I think about that, having people from all over the world stay in my apartment. I'm their experience of someone living, of an American, right? they'll take that home
Mhm.
as part of the experience of them being in America. Or I stayed at someone's place and they were so nice to me, or they was like, we had great conversations.
Yeah.
Then what happens is that your world grows rather than
Sure.
your, yeah. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I mean it's great like having that community mindset. And I think like this is where we can go back to history a little bit and look at cultures that are community.
So many.
Yeah, so many beautiful, beautiful cultures. Um, I'm on TikTok, but I watched this beautiful video that this wonderful Black woman did of like the tribes in Africa and how they were matriarchal and there was no hierarchy and it was such a great like it was like a 1 minute video, but it really broke down like how these other communities worked. And I think it's what the system that we currently have is breaking.
Mhm.
And we
I
need to open up our awareness and our consciousness of like, what are the other ways? Like, what's next? The
Mhm.
question that you pose, what's next? Like, how can we do this better?
Yeah. I think we're on the verge of it, which why I think why there's so much tension,
Mhm.
right? The old ideas want to remain and want to thrive, and then there's this new idea, these new ways in which people are thinking about living
Mhm.
that are emerging. I'm hopeful in that way.
Yeah,
That we're the reason why we're at this tension moment, because there's a fight between what was and what will be.
right.
And I hope that what will be is something so much better.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to be in this time to like support and usher in what will be.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because I mean, I'm involved in some of the social justice movements,
Mm-hmm.
and it is exhausting work at times. but but at the same time, never has my life had more purpose. I don't know what the heck I was doing before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot more exciting, and I'm glad to be having these conversations and connecting with like-minded people from all over the place who are also contemplating these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So we're almost at time. How can people find you?
Um, great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah.
You can find me on Instagram at the Baron Wright. My website is thebaronarts.com. Facebook, Baron Wright. LinkedIn, Baron Wright. I think that's the easiest way to find me.
Yeah. Well, this is amazing because I think because of your background and all of your different things that you've done, like you're a very different kind of coach that someone can connect to if they're wanting to step forward in their life and make some powerful, powerful changes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I love this conversation. I'm so glad that we went some of the places that we went.
Me too. I didn't know where we were going, but I'm grateful for it. It's a conversation. I think, like you said, conversation that needs to be happening.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for watching. This show can be heard on Spanglish Radio Network, and her network is a part of Spanglish World Media Network. Check out spanglishworld.ca for all news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you.